someone without anyone ever looking into their background and finding out the way I convict them in court. That's a bad thing, right? So those are some of the bills we passed. Let me think of what else. The Equality Act. The Equality Act would basically make LGBTQ people equivalent in the civil rights laws for the other groups we protect, racial minorities, religious people, just saying people can't discriminate against you because of who you are. Again, pretty basic, widely popular thing in American life. We passed, no action. Protecting the dreamers. Imagine yourself being brought here to this country when you were 2 or 3 years old. No choice of yours. You just sort of ended up here one day, and you were probably so young when you were brought here, you don't even remember being from the other country that your family was from. And you grow up and you work hard in school and you get good grades and you follow the rules just like everybody else does. And America says to you, well, you're still not a full citizen, we may just deport you if we want to, right? So protecting those kids, again, huge majority of the American people agree that those kids should be protected. Whatever else you do on immigration, you can build the wall, you can protect the border, great, but like most people think it's a fair thing that these kids who had nothing to do with their choice to come here should be protected. We passed that. We're about to pass a bill to bring down the price of prescription drugs. So it's heartbreaking. I mentioned insulin before. Insulin was a drug that was invented in Canada. Does anyone in here have a friend or family member or even themselves who takes insulin, who relies on it? You don't have to give away your own information, but you know somebody, right? Almost every family has somebody. So insulin saves people's lives. It allows people with diabetes to go on living something close to a normal life. It was invented in Canada in like the early 1920s by a professor who had so much integrity that he believed he should never take out a patent for that drug or profit for it in any way because it was so important to mankind. So he sold the rights to it to a university up there for $1. You know, think about what people make from drugs these days. He sold it, gave it away basically for $1. Somehow, when that drug started making its way into the United States, a company that still exists today called Eli Lilly became in charge of distributing it and selling it all over the U.S. And they gradually raised the price. So now, today, the sticker price of insulin for most places in the United States is about $300 for a dose. In Canada, where it originated, it's about $30, 1/10 of what we pay. And that's why if you've ever read or heard about people taking buses up to Canada to stock up on as much insulin as they can get and bring it back. Does anyone think that's right in the United States of America, the most powerful country in the history of the world with the best record of innovation and all? No, of course not, right? So we actually have the ability to make that illegal. They don't have to be allowed to continue to do that anymore, and we're going to pass a law in the next couple of weeks that can do that. So those are just some of the examples. We've also spent a lot of money on school safety. That, to the credit of my colleagues, has been relatively bipartisan. We've been able to get them to agree to spend more money on the grants that can like protect schools and pay for police officers to be in schools and that kind of thing. Any parting shots? All right, moving to 10. Go ahead.
All right. So a lot of Democratic presidential candidates have talked about it. Do you support making healthcare cheaper for the lower income families at the cost of increasing premiums or increasing taxes for the middle class?
No. So I do want healthcare to go down for everybody, but the middle class is suffering bad on healthcare. And actually the cost of healthcare is shrinking the size of the middle class. It's driving people into poverty. And you can look at charts to make this clear, but middle class wages, like what you're earning in our country, have stayed almost completely flat for like the last 4 years. They haven't gone up. And the cost of healthcare and drugs has gone way up. So if we were sitting here 40 years ago and you know, your father was a steel worker and your mother was a teacher or vice versa, or something like that, you know, maybe one parent didn't have to work and they could have a second car and take a vacation sort of thing every year. Now the price of healthcare and other things, but especially healthcare, has gone up so much that it has literally taken out a huge chunk of every middle class family's budget. And there's just things they can't afford anymore. And they have to work extra. They're not home with their kids. It's really hurting our society. So the way I would do it is a little bit different. First of all, I wouldn't talk the way a lot of the candidates talk, like they know the answer on everything about healthcare and they can just sort of by fiat create a government-run system that'll solve every problem. That just isn't true, guys. You know, no matter how much you care about helping people, the healthcare economy is super complex and it's going to take a million different things to try to fix it. But I would do some things that we know have worked in the individual states. One of the great things about America is we have 50 different states with their own laws and ways of doing things. And people call it, you know, laboratories of democracy. You get to try ideas and see if they work. And there are some states that have done some really smart things that have kept healthcare costs flat or even brought them down a little bit because some of those measures. Go ahead.
So I know I know it's a higher level that, you guys make all the rules. Do you guys ever look at like models that other countries do? So like say like minimum wage, like I know like a lot of other countries have like a separate board for like monitoring like the increase in minimum wage. Like whereas like our country does it like differently. Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we do. I would say on minimum wage in particular, we really looked more at the experience of cities and states that have already raised their minimum wage. So kind of to the same point, some places like Seattle, other big cities, we looked more within the United States on that one. People look at other countries on healthcare. That's a really good area to look. Our country is very different from them, but it's worth knowing that, like in Japan, in Germany, and other very advanced countries, they treat people for half or less of the cost that we do, and they get the same outcomes. So we start to ask ourselves why that is. Yeah, I want to ask a question of you guys before we leave, and we'll do a rapid fire because I think we don't have much. But I've got a little over a year left in my term. Let's say that the only term I'm ever going to serve. One thing you think above all others I should try to do. Somebody who has, anyone have an idea that just don't overthink it. Just spit it out. Kind of tell me your priorities.
Try to lower the gas tax.
Oh, okay, nice. Lower the gas tax. What else? Come on, quick, rapid fire. President. Student debt. Okay, that's definitely on the list. Student debt for you too. Okay. Anything else?
negotiate the prices of drugs with drug companies.
So that's the bill we're going to pass in the next month. It's called HR 3, and it will allow negotiation over $250 for different types of drugs. Why does that matter? The way we bring down the price of insulin, we don't necessarily just dictate you can't charge more than this. The government is the biggest buyer of drugs in the United States. So the government is sort of like, they're sort of like the Walmart or Costco of drugs. Like, we have the most market power. So if the government went to one of these companies and said, you know what, we're not going to buy insulin from you anymore, like we went to Eli Lilly, except if you charge us only $100 instead of $300. Eli Lilly can't really afford to say no to that because we're so big. We buy one out of all 3 drugs in the whole country. And so then that resets the rate for everybody. But we've never allowed the government to do that type of negotiation before. Okay, rapid fire. What else?
Raise the age of buying tobacco and vaping products to 21.
Raise the age. Okay. To what?
21.
21. Okay. Anyone disagree with him? No one. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Anything else?
Term limits.
Term limits. Term limits and
Increase support for the arts.
okay, increase the sports for the arts. My wife's gonna be really happy that you said that. My wife is the director of an art museum, and she every day, like, sometimes we'll send out emails from the campaign about the issues we're working on, and she'll call me up to remind me that we didn't put anything in there about puppies or the arts. And so those are the 2 things she wants to work on. Let me say a quick thing about term limits. Does anyone know what she means when she says term limits for members of Congress? So remember at the beginning when I said there are some members of Congress who've been there longer than I've even been alive? So people serve for a really long time there. Some people think it would be healthier for our system if you could only serve like 4 terms for 8 years or 5 terms for 10 years or whatever it is. Some states have tried that, and like California is one, Florida is one. You hear mixed reviews of it. I'm interested in term limits because I've seen some of these people who've been there forever up close, and I know that you're not going to get your money's worth with them. Here's what I would always say to that. The most important thing, the best term limit there is an election. And so I think the first priority is making sure our elections are actually fair, and that every 2 years someone like me has to work to be reelected. The problem in our country today, my district is pretty competitive. It leans toward the Republicans by about 3 percentage points, which means that every 2 years, you're going to get 2 people who are relatively down the middle going against each other because that's where the bulk of people are in that district. There's a lot of districts in the United States where like 90% of the people are Democrats and 10 are Republicans or vice versa. And so then you get more extreme people. And it's then very easy for them to get reelected because all the people from their party. And so that's how you end up a lot of times with people who've been there too long and totally out of touch. I think if we make the elections more competitive, if you get someone you really, really like and think is good at their job. If you want to elect them to 20 terms in a row, that's your right. The same way as if you wanted to hire a lawyer for 40 years to work for your company, you would keep hiring the same lawyer, right? And you wouldn't want anyone to tell you you can't keep us. So what I've kind of said is if we cannot break through on the competitiveness of elections, term limits are a good second option to address the same problem. But I think elections need that. All right, I think I'm getting a signal from the back. Anyone have anything burning they wanted to say before we finish? Teach, go ahead. Again, my wife, you're going to have to talk to her before that's ever allowed. But look, here's one thing I want to say about that. We in our system, we focus a lot on the president because of the media and all those sorts of things. And look, there are plenty of areas where I disagree with the current president. But one thing I will say, not necessarily in his defense, but I think it's important for you to know, a lot of the problems that we have nothing to do with President Trump. And they were around before he ever came into office. And a lot of those problems emanate from the refusal of Congress to get together and do its job. And so while I'm in the House of Representatives, my focus is kind of in that world of just trying to make sure that institution works a little bit better and we have a little bit better of a culture change no matter who the president is. And you guys deserve that. I mean, we will not reach our potential as a people if we bank everything on the presidential elections and we let Congress just become, a clown show, for lack of a better word, which is kind of what it's been in recent years. Go ahead.
So how do you feel about the people our age who aren't registering to vote?
Yeah,
how's that affecting the?
Thank you. That's what I should have brought up. I feel bad about it. And here's the thing: I could stand here and I could give you a great fire-breathing, chest-beating lecture about how you got to vote. People died for that right. People marched in the South for that right. I just don't think that really works. Like if you're not motivated by the United States enough to vote out of like a positive emotion like love or duty or any of those things, it's just not going to happen. So I'll just ask you, like as a favor to me, as someone that cares about this government, think a little bit about how lucky you are to be born in the United States at this time in history. And if there's any way that you can appreciate that and appreciate how great we are as a country, everything about our greatness rests on the willingness of people to participate in and fight for this country. We are the first country in the history of the world that tried this great experiment of being more democratic, of coming up with a republic system, of actually saying that all people are created equal with the same rights, even though we didn't live up to it and still don't live up to it today. We still are the first ones that ever tried that, and we're the only ones that have grappled with religious freedom at this level and this many different people from different races and different countries and all that stuff. We're really unique, and we dominate the world despite all those challenges. And despite the best efforts of people in Washington to basically destroy what's great about this country, we still have somehow come through. And I think we're going to come through for the rest of the century at least. But that won't work if we end up getting a whole class of people that don't want to participate and don't care. And that's what I'm worried about. The economy is changing. We're becoming a lot more unequal. Only the people at the very top really have a huge stake in immediately trying to get things for them. And the answer to that is more democracy. It's more people voting, more people saying what they think and expressing their interests and all that kind of stuff. And so it's going to be up to any of you to decide if you want to participate. But I just ask you to really, really think about how special this whole experiment is. And we want you to be part of it. Okay? Thank you guys very much.